up on Promoter 101, the Supermensch, Alice Cooper's manager, Shep Gordon.
I'm going to be on Promoter 101.
In case the theme song didn't hit you over the head with it, you're listening to Promoter 101 with your host, Dan Steinberg.
And I'm Luke Pierce. Welcome back to reality, everyone. It's now the second week of 2017. Shit is getting real. The year-end shutdown in the music business is really a magical thing. The labels and agencies are out the door the Friday before Christmas, and everyone kind of saunters back in the office on the 2nd or 3rd of January. But Dan, both of us had shows playing through the end of the year, meaning we're never really fully escaping it all. I also had a wedding in Nashville and some meetings in San Francisco and Napa those last few days of the year, so this year's shutdown definitely felt a little short. You were in Maui, on the other hand. How was that?
Maui was great. It was a tad bit of a working vacay for me. I covered a Straight No Chaser date on the island and recorded a few interviews with some of the members and the management of Straight No Chaser, so that's going to be a great session. We also had a chance to catch up with Supermensch, Shep Gordon himself, and that's going to be coming up in just a couple of weeks as well. So great things happening, but we were definitely working all our way through. How about some news?
It's APAP in New York. That's the Association of Performing Arts Presenters. It's the annual conference at the London Hotel in New York where the performing art promoters get together with agents and start mapping out their calendar year for the upcoming fall and the following spring seasons. I really haven't heard much from APAP this year. We're recording this on Sunday night, so it's the last 2 days of APAP coming up on tonight and tomorrow. David Britt, the CEO of my company, is there, as are a bunch of our agent friends. He says it's been productive, but Dan, we both obviously took it off this year. What are you hearing?
Well, first of all, we know how much APAP means to you if you think London's where it's at, because that's clearly where the hang is. That's particularly at Ramsey's restaurant and the bar there. But it's actually at the Hilton in New York, right across the street where the conference and hotel officially takes place. But yeah, it's going off. Everybody seems to be there, and it's just the massive meetings just seem to happen.
APAP seemingly has become this thing where it's the culmination of the smaller regional arts conferences. PAC presenters seem to be waiting until after APAP to firm up their seasons, which is kind of slightly annoying because it creates this logjam on everyone's desk in late January and early February when it comes time to confirm and send those brochures marketing to print.
I think the more time those guys have to put their season together, the better season they feel they're getting. But less time they have to market it, so there you have it.
Sure.
In case you're wondering if being bankrupt can affect a lawsuit, just ask American Idol's Philip Phillips as he's battling with 19's management in court.
Like I mentioned, we're recording this on Sunday night, and the Golden Globes are wrapping up in the Beverly Hilton Ballroom in Beverly Hills. There's a few highlights on the music side of things that have happened so far since we've been recording. Donald Glover, a.k.a. Childish Gambino, won Television Best Series for Musical Comedy for his brand new show, Atlanta. It's a show about Donald's character managing his cousin in the Atlanta rap scene, and it's absolutely fantastic. Definitely recommend you check it out. Congrats to Donald Glover and all the creative minds behind Atlanta. And tons of love so far for La La Land. The musical theater took down Best Original Score, Best Original Song, Best Original Screenplay, and Ryan Gosling won for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy. Emma Stone's also up for an award, but we're definitely not going to wait around to finish up to talk about that.
Sound like you're no love is lost with you for the Golden Globes there, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which is the body that awards the Golden Globes, is made up of 90-some reporters, largely from European outlets, who vote on these awards. And they're often set up with private screenings, trips to sets, one-on-one interviews with the creatives during all these processes. Whereas you have the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, that's AMPAS, which votes in the Oscars, which has 6,000 plus members. So it's definitely more populous. The Globes feel very swayable. I'm not going to use the word bribable, but it definitely feels like that. That being said, it looks like an awesome time with a ton of drinks and famous people, so I can't knock it entirely. And what the fuck do I know? I just work in music.
Very cool. Moving from the Golden Globes on to a big congrats to Jack Randall as he's just gotten the big seat at Ted Carlin Agency. And just in time for this year's APAP. Hope that new gig does not affect his stylish dressing skills. Congrats, Jack. Hope you have a couple of big drinks at Faces and Names tonight to celebrate your new gig.
More in the world of movers and shakers. Congrats are in order for the new Executive Vice President for Marketing and Business at Sony Nashville, John Zarling. Randy Goodman announced that he appointed John on January 4th, and John's leaving his post at Scott Borchetta's Big Machine label group. Jay-Z is a fantastic mover and a shaker and a guy with a ton of positive energy. I'm really excited to see what he'll do with the new digs over at Sony. Congrats, John. We're going to take a moment now to break down Jim Ledestri's BuzzAngle year-end report on the state of recorded music. We're going to be sure to post a link to the report on Facebook so you can comment on it and let us know your thoughts. It's a hefty 67 pages, and we're not going to spend that much time talking about it today. But if you get the chance to read it, it's a ton of pictures and big words. It's kind of like USA Today. There's a lot of great news in this report, as many people have been breaking down and summarizing. Dan, it's worth talking about today. In 2016 versus 2015, music consumption was up 4.9%. That's recorded music side of things, Dan. And all of that was driven by the continuing explosion of streaming. Album sales, that's physical sales in CDs and vinyls, and digital sales through your iTunes, your Amazon, et al., was down 15%. From 205 million albums sold in 2015 to 173 million albums sold last year. Vinyl was one of the remaining bright spots in the physical album world, which is up 25% year over year. So it's more than just a hipster fad at this point. But one area that I'd like to talk about is the report points out that subscription-based streaming, that's your folks streaming on-demand audio, paying $9.99 a month for Spotify Premium, Apple Music, Amazon Music, etc., rose to become even a higher total share of consumption this year. That means that the folks that are paying for stream subscriptions are listening to more music as a greater percentage of the pie. That's an exciting indicator because by all accounts, the biggest leading indicator for the success of the recorded music industry is getting people to move away from the quote-unquote freemium ad-supported model to the premium subscription model. So that's very, very encouraging. One of my personal favorites of this thing was a little bit morbid, but I enjoyed the breakdown of it, was where they broke down the recognizing those who have passed, where they broke down the catalog sales for David Bowie, Prince, and Merle Haggard in the days, weeks, and months following their death. Prince and Bowie were in the top 10 of total album sales for 2016 following their deaths, and consumption rose almost 200%. Literally the moment after they died in streaming consumption sales. It was absolutely insane. Kind of morbid to think about, but certainly it makes sense. It's just weird to see it quantified on paper like that.
Some shit to nerd out to, as you apparently were.
Yeah, I definitely nerded out to that report. And like I said, we'll post a Facebook link to the article so you guys can check it out if you want to. It's really cool to see some of the shifts in consumption patterns of music and how it affects not just the recorded side of business, but the live side of business as well too.
Cool. That link's already up on our Facebook page, and I think that's about enough news for the moment.
Hi, this is Jack Ross from UTA. I'm going to be at CMW, live on stage with Steiny for Promoter101.
This is the section of the podcast where we break down the hashtag Promoter101 tweets. If you're not following Dan on Twitter, he is at The Jew. I highly recommend it. This is the part of the podcast where we break down the ramblings and musings of Dan Steinberg on Twitter. First up, when someone asks you to invest, but will not give the details of how the investment works, run.
I get pitched as if I'm on Shark Tank to fund everything from events to real estate to marijuana companies. And when it's got a solid business plan, I like to invest. But when people come to me for money and tell me I'm asking too many questions or don't worry about it on how we're going to pay you back, that's our problem, I get scared. And I close the checkbook quick.
When you're on vacation and forced to do some work.
When you're an owner of a big business or a small business, the world does not care if you're on or off the clock, and some days are harder than others. This week in Maui, I just wanted to watch the waves come in, but had to do some work. I know you all feel for me, and I get it. So, it was work as need to.
Perhaps one of my favorite tweets you've made, Dan? When someone quotes Aaron Sorkin during a business call and you find respect for them automatically.
This is actually an older tweet, but I brought it back because it was brought up to me while I was in Hawaii this week. Luke and I, as well as some friends like Steve Martin and Andrea Johnson and many, many others, just love Aaron Sorkin as a writer. And every once in a while you get a great quote, and it just makes us happy. This is my day of jubilee.
An excellent reference from season 1 of The West Wing.
Hey, this is Dave Roberts and Sega Isha from Straight No Chaser.
Hey, this is David Britz from Works Entertainment.
And you're listening to Promoter 101.
This week, Dan caught up with ABI Management and NS2's Brian Penix backstage in Seattle at the Moore Theater during Tommy Emmanuel's concert. Brian is the day-to-day manager for Tommy Emmanuel, SIMO, and Andy McKee.
Promoter 101, backstage at the Moore Theater in Seattle. Tommy Emmanuel is playing tonight, and we're joined with his amazing manager, also concert promoter from NS2, Brian Penix. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
Also sitting in the room, probably talking quite a bit of shit, Rich Sellers is hanging out.
Hi, Dan.
Ooh, sexy, baby.
Oh,
Welcome
yeah.
to Seattle, Brian.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So you're living the dream. You're on the bus with the artists going market to market. What's that like?
Well, it's fun. I mean, and it's also fun to go to like so many of the venues that you see on a piece of paper or you see in a route sheet, but you don't necessarily always make it to. So it's kind of good to go out on the road and see what the artist is going through or see what places you're trying to book the artist in, Dan.
So the Boise's aren't necessarily your first choice for vacation destinations.
Not necessarily, although I do have friends in Boise, and it is a very pretty place.
It is a lovely place. Everybody's kind of surprised that Boise is really not Spokane when they get there. It's quite lovely.
Yeah. Not everywhere is Spokane, thank God, yeah.
It is a little weird because you have these moments between leaving Denver and getting to Seattle and the shit in between.
You're absolutely right about that.
I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. What the fuck happened in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're on the road. How long are you out with Tommy?
About 14 days, actually.
So living on the bunk, that's a day in, day out kind of thing now. So you got the road chops back.
Yeah, shoot, I've been on the road off and on for 15 years, so it's nothing new, you know. I sleep really well on a bus.
And masturbation, does that come right back to you on the bus? It's really tight, right?
It is really tight, but, you know, at least there's curtains.
Rich just got off the road with Trailer Park Boys, so he's quite familiar with the tight space in the bunk.
Oh, it's nice. Yeah, they have splash-proof curtains.
Which is good if you live in a bus with bubbles. So, management, promoting, you wear two hats. Which do you prefer?
I mean, honestly, that's going to change every day of the week. Thankfully, I manage artists that are really cool and really low maintenance. You know, knock on wood there. They're amazing musicians. They're amazing artists. You know, I don't really have too many troubles out of them. Usually the troubles fall into, oh, we have a bad date or a promoter dropped the ball somewhere. Someone with a radio station screwed something up. You know, those are usually the troubles in my management world, you know. Troubles in promoting world are the same troubles that most people have. And, you know, some weeks it's great because you're confirming a bunch of great shows with a bunch of great artists. And some weeks it's hell because, you know, of just the weird crap that happens in our business or the lack of respect or the lack of people's time and attention that people give each other. That can drive you crazy too.
Okay, so in your case as a manager, you mentioned the acts you work with. Obviously, Tommy Emmanuel and Andy McKee is also an act you're working with right now. He's new to your roster.
Correct. And then we also manage a rock and roll act named SIMO.
Who, if you haven't seen them, check them out. They are pure rock and roll.
Absolutely. And then we just signed a new act that you will all be seeing probably the next 3 months called Greta Van Fleet that I'm very, very, very proud of.
Is this a Promoter 101 exclusive tip?
This is a Promoter 101 exclusive
We broke
tip.
it here first.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, Frank, and I are assembling a great team, and I think the world is going to be amazed by these young guys.
And Aaron's your partner in the management side, right?
That is correct.
He looks like Jesus come to management. He's a great guy, but he's got amazing hair.
He does. I'm very jealous, and I live vicariously through Aaron in a lot of ways.
I mean, if Polestar gave an award for best hair, Michael Belkin would lose out to him.
He absolutely would.
I mean, it'd be tight, though.
Yeah, it would be tight.
I mean, it'd probably be like the Red Rocks Award. It'd be named after Michael's hair, and he would win it. That's how that would go. Anyway, so Aaron's a genius there, and obviously you have deep relationship with the Frankses. They're partners in NS2 as well, the Franks brothers.
Correct.
So that's an interesting thing. You guys are one of the few indies that remain.
That is correct.
So let's talk about that now. You came from another indie, and before that, another indie, right?
Correct.
So you've got a long history. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your promotion chops and the jumps from and in and out of Outback. And there was an AC days too,
yeah,
right?
I started at AC Entertainment, and luck and timing played a lot into it. I started working with Ashley Capps, who was my original mentor. And after a couple interviews, he said, "Hey, man, I want you to come on board and kind of be a floater, and I'm not sure what I'm going to get you to do just yet, but I think I do want you to work on this thing that we're going to do right down the street from where you went to college. I think we're going to call it Bonnaroo or something like that." And I'm like, "All right, cool, bro, I'm in," you know. And
Cool.
so
Did you get stock in that by any chance?
I did not get stock in that, and you know, especially these days, I really wish I did. But I did put a lot of sweat equity into the first few years of that festival.
Okay, and then there was some crossover with some tourings that were co-promoted with Outback.
Correct. My first tour that I really went on the road and went out there and saw America, so to say, was with Alison Krauss and Union Station, which was an awesome tour to go out with. I mean, not only was it
Not necessarily a club tour.
No, not necessarily a club tour. Everything was pretty much first class, and we were selling a lot of tickets, and that band and that organization is a very well-run machine and a family-run machine, so it just, it felt like family out
This
there.
is right on top of Down from the Mountain, right?
It was just post Down from the Mountain. I think it was a Lonely Runs Both Ways tour, which was...
So this is a good moment.
Yeah, it is a really good moment.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is the cocaine of bluegrass tours.
I guess if you want to call it that, sure. I don't think there's much cocaine.
I kind of
out there.
do, but yeah. The elite, let's go with that.
Yeah, I was on that tour out back in AC Entertainment. We were co-promoting all those dates, and that's where I met Darren Lashinsky. Darren and I became friends, and next thing you know, I'm working at Outback Concerts with Darren.
Okay, and Darren, historic promoter, he's born into the royalty of the business. His
Correct.
dad was a legendary promoter and named his company in tribute to his dad's company.
Correct. His dad had a company called National Shows. We started NS2, which stands for National Shows 2.
So a sequel promoter.
Sequel promoter, absolutely.
But in tribute to his father.
Absolutely. And actually, his grandfather was a promoter as well. So, I mean, it's pretty far out. He's third generation, so...
It's funny because you always talk about you want your kids to do something better than you do, but I think you could clearly say that Darren has achieved the next level.
Absolutely.
But there was no question that National Shows was an amazing promoter, and before there was promoters jumping all over the country, they were doing that. They had a regional setup that was second to none.
Absolutely. They had their territory. It pretty much went from like West Virginia down through East Tennessee, basically down to like Florida. And he had his territory, and he did all the great rock acts of the 70s and 80s and all the country acts of the early 90s. He did it, before everything got gobbled up by SFX, Live Nation, Clear Channel, whatever the heck you want to call it. So
it's an impressive thing that Darren has built, and he's certainly taken the tools that his family gave him and built from that. It's neat to see the difference, because if you go back and look at the history of what those guys did, you can clearly see how it's evolved.
Absolutely, and what's kind of cool, and this is kind of where Larry and Fred stepped in. They did
Larry and Fred Frank.
Larry and Fred Frank. They did the same thing with their father's business. They're second generation promoters. Their father, Herb Frank, he was out there promoting Johnny Cash and Charlie Pride and stuff like that. They had a very similar story that Darren had. So the fact that those two got together and helped finance NS2 and get that off the ground, speaks volumes,
Shit, man, I feel like if I didn't know that back in the beginning, maybe I never would have started, since my dad wasn't a concert promoter. Guess you and me are lucky we just didn't know any better.
Yeah. My dad was an engineer, so, if it wasn't Elvis, he thought it was crap. So there you go.
It still holds up today.
Well, there's some truth to that.
Okay, so on the promoting side, you're buying a lot of St. Paul and the Broken Bones dates?
I like to work with good agents. I like to work with good managers, and I like to work with good acts. Sometimes not in that order. Jason Isbell, St. Paul and the Broken Bones, the Avett Brothers. That's one you work with a lot as well, Dan.
A fan.
Yeah, and Shovels and Rope. I work with those acts a lot. I also book two facilities. I book the Charleston Music Hall in Charleston, South Carolina, and the Carolina Theater Durham in Durham, North Carolina.
And quite a few shows at the Ryman in Nashville, right?
Yeah, let's not leave out the Ryman Auditorium. That's probably one of my favorite places to do shows. It sells tickets. It's a great room. It doesn't really get much better than that place, quite honestly.
So you're here in Seattle with Tommy's always doing great business in this market. He has an amazing relationship with PBS. And he's found a way that when you see him on TV and you see his fingers moving, it can connect with fans in a much different way. And they don't have that internationally. And he's a huge star internationally, particularly in Australia, where you compare him to, a Willie Nelson?
Yeah, it was funny. Last summer, I went to Australia for the first time with Tommy. I always heard he was a household name, whatever. And I had to see it for myself. So I went over there, and the vibe I got over there was that he's sort of like the Willie Nelson of Australia. Willie Nelson is an American icon. Not everybody goes to a Willie Nelson show. Not everybody buys a Willie Nelson album. But everybody knows Willie, and everybody thinks he's a cool dude. That's the way Tommy is in Australia. You're like, hey, yeah, what about that guitar player? Oh, yeah, Tommy. That guy's really cool. Yeah, man. That's the vibe of him in Australia. It's really far out to kind of be a part of that,
So it's fair to say in America, PBS really broke him through the door here.
Yeah, PBS definitely kicked open the door. He was pretty much playing like the 400 to 500 seaters of the world, and it really took him up to more like that 1,000 to 2,000 cap range, depending on the market, of course.
And in a flamenco world, you can see his skills are that of a John McLaughlin or a Joe Satriani. The guy has chops. There's no question.
The guy has chops, but he's mentored after Chet Atkins. That's his godfather. And what's so interesting about Tommy is you listen to his music and you think, oh, that's beautiful music. But as you said before, Dan, it's when you see him, when you see that he's playing three different parts all at the same time. and tying it all together as a one-man band with no loops, no nothing. It's just a guy and an acoustic guitar, naked as can be on stage, basically, and just so enthralling and entertaining and engaging. It just draws you in. And so PBS, to go back to your point, it works so much better than, radio or anything like that, because you can actually see what he does, and if you see it, you believe it.
Yeah, and there's a visual thing that you can only see live. So when you see Tommy at a festival, you might discover him and go, oh my God, the guy's got fucking chops.
Yeah.
But to hear him on the radio, it's like it's beautiful, but you're not seeing what's going on.
Exactly.
Much in the case of a George Winston, where you want to see, when you go to his concerts, you want to see his fingers moving because you want to see the magic of that. Or Chick Corea, you want to be at the side of the piano that you can see his fingers on the keys, because that's the show.
That is the show, yeah. I mean, the good thing about Tommy, though, I think that separates him from a lot of just players, is he's actually an entertainer. He cracks a lot of jokes on stage, tells a lot of funny stories, does a few guitar gimmicks, like Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix would play guitar with his teeth, Tommy will sit there and, look at his watch, throw a capo around. Sometimes he'll beat the crap out of it. Sometimes he'll scratch the crap out of it. He'll do anything he can to get a tone, a sound, or laugh,
So he hams it up pretty good.
He hams it up pretty good, yeah.
So I probably, besides you yourself, have promoted more Tommy Emmanuel shows in America than anyone else.
I would agree with that statement.
So we were talking about this earlier. I've never met Tommy.
Really?
Yeah. Ironically, I've never met Tommy before. I've been to his shows, and it just hasn't organically happened.
Well, we'll have to change that tonight.
Yeah,
or do you want to remain a man of mystery?
It's just kind of funny. We were just talking about that. It's just one of the artists I've never actually met, which I thought you'd find entertaining.
That is very entertaining. I had no idea. That's pretty funny.
Which either means I'm flaking and not going to a ton of shows, or just I'm too busy at my desk doing my job, making sure we're putting asses in seats. That's how I like you to look at that.
But you know what? I know that statement's true, so I'm not going to be pissed for you not meeting my artist. So let me put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think you really give a fuck either way. But let's talk about this. The independent promoting scene has changed quite a bit. In the last couple of years, we've seen our friends at C3 fall. We know that the Bowery guys are just in the final steps of going to AEG. Obviously, Ashley is going the way of the dodo bird and taking the check at Live Nation.
Deal, yeah.
So we're seeing this happen more and more, and less of our friends are there. Clearly, Golden Voice took a check a while back. There are less independents than ever.
Yeah.
So the cheese stands alone, right? It's us and you guys and a couple of randoms around the country, but there's not many left. When you're selling shows as a manager, what's your thought of selling to other independents versus majors? Do you care who you're selling the show to, as far as they work for Live Nation, they work for AEG, or I'm looking for the entrepreneur that's financially tied to the show?
I'll be completely honest with you. There are great Live Nation offices, and there are horrible Live Nation offices.
Which ones do you think are horrible?
I don't know.
He was literally looking for. You could see it. The wheels are turning. Is there anyone I really want to throw under the bus?
I was really thinking about that, but the thing about it is it's been a long time since I've worked with a bad Live Nation office that I can't really remember, because I sort of cross people off the list once I've had a bad experience with them, and they're just sort of dead to me in my brain. I don't know.
And you've got a similar management style to the guys at Works Entertainment, where you find someone you want to work with, and you
just keep going.
You do as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Makes it easier for marketing. It's consistent.
Absolutely. And the same thing, with AEG. There are great AEG markets. I mean, we actually do a lot of business with AEG. There are great AEG offices, but there are also horrible AEG offices. But the same thing with indies. Now, one of the differences I would have with an indie is if a show wasn't selling well and I knew the guy did everything he could, as far as marketing and everything else to make the show successful, I might cut an indie a break. I don't think I would ever cut Live Nation or AEG a break, because, I know that they're getting a paycheck, and that's just that.
Well, and I've also appreciated that fact that I've always feared managers that were promoters too. Bill Silva with Jason Mraz, the days of both of them going back and forth, it exists. And I've learned that managers that were promoters or are promoters know the plight.
Yep.
They know the day-to-day fight. They know the hardship that is being a promoter.
Yep.
So my conversations with guys like you and Bill Silva tend to be, Okay, did we try this? Okay, cool, we did. And it's this faster conversation back and forth of, did we try this, this, and this? Oh, great. And have you used this resource, and this resource? Knowing what all of the shorthand is, it's a much faster conversation.
It's a much faster conversation. You get down to business really quickly, and there's just no bullshit, really. I know what your daily struggles are. You know what my daily struggles are, and we just go to fucking town.
Yeah, and, as a show, if it's off, you ask me, is it a good venue or is it a venue where the deal sucks?
Yeah.
So you know how bad the deal really is internally. It's like, it is what it looks like, or no, we're fine, don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
And it ends there. It's a different conversation. So for you, the industry seems to be in a good place. Your artists are getting bigger.
Yeah.
Andy seems like he's on the development move. We had great shows with him in the Northwest and in Colorado last week.
Andy's definitely on the move, man, and I think 2018 is going to be a big year for Andy McKee based on just some of the plans and ideas he and I are laying out right now and some of the music he's creating. I mean, it's unbelievable. So.
Now, what's the route for that? Is that going to be PBS as well? Are you guys going to shoot a special?
It's still kind of under wraps right now, but pretty much my goal for Andy, I'll say I'm not going to tell you what the plan and what the rollout is, but my goal for Andy is to just strictly line him up with all the great guitarists of the world, because I really think Andy could be the next guitar god out there. I mean, I do think that in the next 10 years, you would say Tommy Emmanuel, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Andy McKee. So that's kind of my goal.
And are you hoping to develop that management side more, or are you going to try and balance both managing and promoting?
I'm going to try to balance both management and promoting because, like I said, I like working with good acts, good managers, good agents, and it really doesn't matter if I'm managing them or if I'm promoting them. I just like to work with good people. I love music. This is what we do,
God, man, when do you sleep?
I really don't.
And you guys are busy, so you go out and cover a lot of your shows, too, that you book. You're, like, physically in the room.
Not nearly as much as I used to, fortunately and unfortunately. Fortunately, because I have a 5-year-old kid.
That's when I met you. I met you when you were at Outback, and my partner now was also there, as was Darren Lashinsky.
Yeah, Jason Zink. I met at Outback, and we're still friends. I had dinner with him.
Henry Glasscock.
Henry Glasscock.
And Kevin Brady. It's like you look at the names that were there and who came out of that camp.
Yeah.
It really seemed like it was the all-star team that Mike had built.
If I was going to put it in sports terms, Mike was an awesome GM. He wasn't necessarily a great coach.
Okay, and I'm not looking to burn Mike's house down here. I mean, everybody's got an opinion of him, and at the end of the day, the machine that Mike built helped us to develop our machine, and we learned a lot from what he developed.
I completely agree with that, And
even more than that, we were gifted a lot of resources and artists that were built through that system, throughout the relationships that were affected by people leaving. So financially, the relationships that were built between knowing Darren and knowing you and knowing Kevin and Bobby Cudd and the things that came together, Henry Glasscock, that fell together just from being close to that was amazing. It's like you talk about luck running off. I think we all got lucky just being near it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I mean, like I said before, Ashley Capps was my original mentor, and, Mike Smartack was another mentor of mine, and Darren has kind of been the one glue, though, throughout most of my career where he's kind of been the mentor to sort of give me the big global perspective on the industry, and Darren still is my mentor, I mean, like...
Darren and you left together to start your own thing.
Yep.
Jam purchased into Outback, and things changed.
Yeah.
So both you and Darren had decided we believe in ourselves. We're going to go do this.
Correct.
Not a bad team to believe in. And you partnered up with the Franks.
Correct.
So that's been, 3 years now, give or take?
No, more like 6. We're going on to our 6th year. Seems like yesterday, doesn't it? It's crazy.
It does, and I guess I should know better.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Okay, wow. Has it really been 6 years?
It's getting ready to be 6 years, yeah. All right, we're in our 6th year right now, yeah.
I had commented recently that it had been a great couple of years living in Seattle, and Elodie reminded me we've been in our house for over 10 years, which...
There you go.
We hadn't moved into the house until we'd already been up here for 4 years, so... the 3 years that I've condensed into 14...
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Kind of works that way. Okay, so NS2 comes together. You're partnered with... the Franks brothers, who've also have under their umbrella Chris Moore at Seymour Presents.
That's sort of a new one, but yes,
and then Tag's there too, right?
Correct.
So it seems like they're on the build and on the grow. So there's still other things coming. It seems like Franks brothers aren't done. They're building this little syndicate quietly.
Absolutely, And what's kind of cool is, if you look at it from a geographic standpoint, we're in the Southeast, and us too. We're in Nashville. Frank's are in Madison, Wisconsin. Then you have Chris Moore in Boise, Idaho. We cover a big gamut of the U.S. I mean, as far as like our knowledge of the markets, our relationships as far as the industry goes, our relationships with the venues, which are just as important. Let's not leave that out. Having a good relationship with the venue, having the right kind of deals with the venues, that's very important.
Right, because you guys run the gamut. I mean, this year, the biggest show must have been the Metallica show opening the stadium at U.S. Bank, right, in Minneapolis.
That was a pretty big deal. Yeah.
But at the same time, you guys are still doing club shows in the development sense.
Absolutely.
So there is no big or small. It's just we do it all.
There is no big or small. We do it all.
But you live in the arenas and the theaters for the most part.
For the most part, yeah. For the most part.
So what's the future hold? What do you see for the industry that you're excited about?
Well, the thing about it is, and the thing that's interesting about the internet, which, I can go to, round and around and around about the internet. I do think that advertising costs are going to keep going down because I feel like we as promoters and also the audience and the artists too are going to keep connecting with the fan base via the internet, via socials, or via some new fucking platform that doesn't even exist yet. And it's going to take a lot of the bullshit out of the equation. I mean, fuck, Dan. How much less money are you spending on print today as you did, say, 8 years ago?
Well, less than you think. But no, actually, this is a bad example tonight because at Seattle we do run print.
Yeah, well, and Tommy Emmanuel's crowd is a print crowd. But
right. So tonight's a bad example, but
yeah.
In general, in the most random markets that aren't Denver, Seattle, or Portland, which are still very print-heavy markets, we're probably under 10% on a show these days.
Absolutely.
So Seattle, I imagine, I have to look at the ad numbers, but I imagine it's probably closer to 15 tonight on the show.
Absolutely. And so I keep having this vision that that trend's going to continue, and it's going to keep spiking in a certain direction, which is going to be really interesting, And I just hope, I tell you, what my biggest gripe about the business is right now is I know you've lived through this 100 times, when you get those 3 or 4 show confirmations and they're like, oh yeah, we want to announce the tour tomorrow and go on sale next Friday or whatever. And it's like, and I get so mad when that happens.
You can't properly set it up.
Because you can't properly set it up, and this happens all the time. I mean, it happens at least once a fucking week. And it drives me.
And always at 5:45 on a Friday.
Yeah, or like
marketing team's gone, and guess what we want to do?
Marketing team's gone, ticketing team's gone, whatever, or you can't call the venue to even see what the on-sale traffic is or anything like that. And it's a shit show. I mean, quite honestly. I mean, like, I wish that whoever it is, managers, agents, or whatever, take a step back and go, you know what? If we really plan this out and give it 2 weeks to plan it out, have time to get marketing proposals together, have time to get radio proposals together, have time to get the graphics together. Another one of my favorites, which I'm sure you'll agree with this one, is, oh, yeah, we want to announce and go on sale next week. And it's like, okay, where's the ad, Matt? Oh, it's not done yet. I mean, it's just like, really, get your shit together.
And then they don't respond to you, and you wind up pulling the picture from Google because it's Saturday at 5 o'clock.
That too,
and they're pissed that the drummer's dead.
Yeah, or
it's
whatever,
like, you left me with this, man.
Whatever,
If you didn't want us to run the picture of the dead drummer, why'd you kill him?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
And quite honestly, I mean, going back to the management side of things, it was shit like that was the first thing that, we try to do slightly differently. Like, every one of our tours, we give promoters like a 3 weeks heads up of an idea of when we want to go on sale. And then we ask them, what's good for your market? We have a dialogue about it. We have our own, we have our ad mats and our assets and all that shit done and sitting on the artist's website so they can access it anytime they want. And I wish more people would get in front of it and do things like that, because I think you would yield better results for the artist. I think you would yield better results for the shows in general. And I also think we'd have faster sellouts. So
I find Tommy to be an interesting thing because we actually have to build the on-sales around PBS's pledges because they have to have the exclusive first run in many cases.
Yep.
And we want that because we want them to run the infomercial that is the show before we go on sale. So obviously, I have no problem with that, but each station has their own pledge period, which tend to line up pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
But the on-sales can be staggered because it behooves the show to be right on top of PBS finishing.
Correct.
So Tommy's unique in that sense that it'd be hard to do a national on sale and still make PBS happy.
Our big thing is, though, because a national on sale is one thing, but you can still announce everything at once. So, like, let's just say pledge period's in December, right? You could still announce your whole tour like November the 30th or whatever, and then you could stagger your on sales between December the 10th and December the 15th or whatever, just depending on when stuff pledges. Because like I said, every market's slightly different, and you know that and I know that. But just having that kind of flexibility is fine, And we talk about national on sales. It's like, why does it really matter other than a press release and maybe an email blast? Why does a national on sale one date really matter? To me, it should always be what's good for the market. You can announce a tour at the same time nationally. You can put fan club tickets at the same time nationally. Other than that, it shouldn't really matter. It should really be what's best for the market, period.
All right, so let's talk about a thing as you have to be considered a major indie.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine if you were looking at the biggest independents in the country now, I would think the combination of NS2, Frank's Brothers, Seymour, Tad, you guys would be one of the top 5.
Yeah, we are.
So with that in mind, when you're looking at dealing with an indie versus a national, when you have to co-promote, what are the things that scare you about some of the smaller indies?
The only thing that scares me about it is what is their bandwidth? I mean, one of the big benefits of, a Live Nation or an AEG or whatever is they do have a lot of bandwidth. They have a lot of support staff, a lot of structure and things like that, and they have deep pockets. Sometimes indies, it could be a one-man show or a two-man show. So you sometimes might have concern about, like, how much can they handle? How much volume can they take on? Response times.
Can they handle the hit if the show goes bad?
All those type of things. Yeah, but
and I'm not talking about promoters like us that have staffs the size we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in general, there are a lot of independents, and you guys have been good about cutting in the local guy. I know you guys work with Stan Levinstone in the East Coast, who's obviously one of the bigger indies.
Yep.
But there are a lot of independents that are like working their way up from clubs, trying to be the next level, and that can be a dangerous thing.
It can be a dangerous thing, I mean, you want to book with your heart, but booking with your heart can sometimes leave you broke, and that's really the most dangerous thing possible as an indie.
Not everybody has the cool lineup like you.
I guess not. I don't know.
And I know it sounds like I was being a smartass, but the bands that you book are amazing. Shovels and Ropes in St. Paul. It's like very cool shit. The Avets. It's like the stuff you actually do on a day-to-day basis are some of the coolest acts on the road right now. It's just like Jason Isbell. It doesn't get much cooler than that.
Nah. Jason's awesome.
So I know that it sounded like I was being a smartass, but I really wasn't.
No. I mean, look, the fun thing about this business and kind of the cool thing about like working with those acts is like, the minute you see them, whether they're an opening act on a tour or whether you're a club act or whatever, the minute you find an act like that, you just raise your hand. You basically go to the agent, you go to the manager and say, oh my God, I love this act. How much can I help? How much can I do? And, you end up doing a market or two, and then all of a sudden on the next tour you're doing 4 markets, and on the next tour you're doing 8 markets, and it usually grows fairly naturally and organically as long as you do a good job and you respond and you like give a shit. I mean,
give them that extra case of beer.
Whatever it takes.
Let's talk about the bands that you're most interested at the moment. I mean, and not necessarily that you're booking or managing. Who's out there that you would recommend people go listen to?
SIMO and Andy McKee.
Okay, shameless plug. And bands that necessarily you aren't booking or managing.
Oh, man. There's a ton of bands that are just awesome that I'm not booking, promoting, or managing. I love The War on Drugs. That's a great act. I'm wearing my Fish shirt right now. Fish is my favorite band.
Brand new band you guys should check out called Fish.
I don't get to book any shows with Fish. I'm not Live Nation, I guess. I didn't get any calls on Dead & Company, but,
It's so cool that those guys all came together and learned the John Mayer song so quickly.
I know, right?
I really never saw that happening, but like, wow.
I mean,
it's like I know John Mayer needed a band, and they came together and pulled together. It's just like I hear that every once in a while they let them play a couple Dead tunes too.
I know, right? But when Bob Weir sings "Your Body Is a Wonderland," I cry every time.
Somewhere everyone just went limp at once. It's that Elmer Fudd mustache just gets me every time. Excellent. Well, hey, I want to thank you so much, Brian, for taking time out during your busy sold-out show here in Seattle to talk to us.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for a sold-out show tonight.
Hey, this is Charlie from Crescent Ballroom, Stateside Present, and the new Van Buren Theater. I'll be a guest on Promoter 101 when I attend my first Polestar Live, and hopefully I'm alive to tell you all about it.
A big thank you to our friend Brian Penix for making time to be on Promoter 101.
Up next, we are joined by Hub International's top event insurance agent, Peter Tempkins. Me and Luke sat down with Peter during Aspen Live this past December.
Sitting here night one of the Aspen Music Conference, Dan Steinberg, joined tonight on Promoter 101, Mr. Peter Tempkins. Welcome to the podcast for the first time. How you doing, man?
Great to be here. Beautiful night in Aspen, good food, good friends, and it's snowing.
It really is. Going to be doing some skiing this week?
Hopefully we'll get out, hit the slopes, do some turns, and not eat too much snow.
Also sitting in tonight is Aaron Reynolds from Emporium's marketing team is hanging out with us tonight, just having some drinks, so he'll be the extra chuckle in the back of the room.
I'm here as an audience member.
You might have caught him a couple of episodes back. So, Peter, you work with some of the more outspoken acts and tours in the industry. You work with AC/DC. You work with Warped Tour. These are not the more mellow shows that tour the world.
No, it's actually fun to be with them. Early in my career, I got involved with AC/DC, and I've been involved with Warp since year one. I'm one of the few original people still left, and as I get the joke, there's only 2 people on that tour without ink, and I'm one of them.
Who's the other?
Kevin Lyman.
2 good people to be associated with it. So, Peter, it's been a great ride for you for a while now, but how'd you get your start in all this?
Fortunately, my stepfather was a business manager dealing with a bunch of musical acts, and I ended up meeting the guy he did insurance with, and he liked what I had to say, offered me a job, and February 1st is the start of my 30th year doing this.
Wow, it's an incredible run.
So for the record, it's a little incestual. Peter does handle Emporium and has since I was early days of Thrasher. Peter covered our insurance, and one of the few people I originally met my first year at Aspen and immediately said to me, you have the wrong insurance. They're not covering you for the nightmare scenario you're about to have.
What was that nightmare scenario?
You know, there's a thing, and I think Peter knew this. Every promoter, especially promoters that do punk rock and metal shows, know that they're very dangerous things. And whether it's somebody taking a straight razor and running through a mosh pit or somebody randomly beating up a little girl in line for a show, we're liable for all these things, and they're very aggressive events, and we need to make sure we're covered. And I immediately said to him, what can you teach me? And he said, I will tell you as much as you want to know. And he proceeded to not only scare the shit out of me of every nightmare scenario that I wasn't currently covered for, and he was right, without looking at my paper. And I sent it to him later. He just asked who I was covering me, and then told me what I wasn't covered for. And for years, we really couldn't afford him at the time, and we learned that. So we wound up leaving and then coming back when we could, and we've been with him for years now. But anytime we don't understand anything, we send it to him. He looks over it and tells us what we've done wrong or what we need to do to fix it. But he's kept our ass protected, and so me and Jason can sleep at night.
As long as I don't have to tuck the 2 of you in, it's a good night.
He's referred to as Uncle Peter. Tell Uncle Peter what you need.
You know what? That's actually the biggest thing about this industry, and that's what I love about the people I work with. It's the communication. You know, a lot of fun, a lot of games, a lot of everything else, but it's the communication. If I know what you're doing, I know how to help you take care of it. It's when you don't tell us stuff, it's a problem.
Okay, so one of my favorite things is, and I've told the story here at Aspen in the Circle a couple times, but one of the few times something went wrong at one of our shows, I called Peter on a Sunday and said, an act that you work with and us just had a moment where the roadie was holding on to something, and then they dropped it, and it fell through a movie screen that was 65 years old, that was vintage and could not be replaced. And how do we go from here? And he said, have them write something up, have your rep write something up, and send it back. And the theater manager had a note from Peter, because he happened to insure both them and us that night, just an email. One way or another, I cover them, the band, and I cover your promoter. One way or another, I'm the one that's going to fix this, and we're on it. On a Sunday, he took the call, walked us through it, told us what to do, and give the venue owner operator some relief that he was on it and not to worry about it. It was covered all the way around.
And again, it goes back to the communication. You got me in the loop, we were able to take care of it, and problem solved.
But he picked up the phone on a Sunday at 5:30 his time and said, what happened?
Listen, at least it wasn't 5:30 a.m. because I know in reading your tweets, you get some really strange things after midnight.
It's probably not the best thing in the world that my insurance rep reads my tweets. So I think a second story, which I just forgot about, was Luke was in Hawaii driving my rental car, and I was about to take off, and I get a text because he dropped me off and kept the car and said I was just in an accident. And I immediately hit Peter and was like, so I gave Luke my car. Is he covered or am I fucked? And he said, give me Luke's number. I know you're taking off. I'll take care of it. And by the time I landed, the two of them had figured out what they needed to know, and he told me not to worry about it. It was going to be fine. But I was on vacation coming home, and I knew that I didn't have to stress about it because Peter was on.
And I was sweating that day, too, because I'd been rear-ended at a traffic light that's notorious for stopping short. And I was actually the third car in a two-car pileup. Somebody had slammed into a car behind me, and that car then hit me. But the person that had hit me, I later found out was an illegal immigrant, was living on the island illegally. And there was she ran off into the woods during the middle of this too. So, I mean, it was a nightmare. But I remember very clearly Dan looping you into an email, and this was maybe 2 or 3 o'clock Maui time, so late in the lower 48, and you were on it in a snap, we got to reply instantly, almost on the phone. It was incredible, That's not a rock and roll moment, but how many of those kind of calls do you see or emails do you see in the panic scenario at 9 p.m. as a show's coming down and something's happening in your time zone? What's the panicked evening phone call like for you?
The panic phone calls for me are when people are injured, like your car accident. First question I asked you, are you okay? Yes. Anybody injured? No. It's just property damage at that point. Unfortunately, through my career, I've been involved in death claims. And those are the things that upset me. But property claims, it's real simple. Fix it. As long as nobody's hurt, it doesn't matter. But as far as the hours, my clients work 9 to 5. Unfortunately, it's 9 at night, 5 in the morning. So we had to be prepared for those calls. And thank goodness I have a wife who's understanding, but also the fact that her friends live around the world. A lot of them can't tell time. So when that phone rings at 4 in the morning, it's not necessarily for me. It's her friends calling. So it works well.
So, Peter, you work with some of the biggest bands in the world, and they consider you family. AC/DC basically considers you part of the entourage and extended family. How do these relationships come to be? Because you don't meet AC/DC in Nashville hanging out at the bar. How does that stuff come together where you find these clients that are legends?
Actually, it was a funny story how I got involved with AC/DC. My sister was a production manager for a magazine. The business management firm for AC/DC had a separate company that was doing merchandising rights. My sister met the guy running that company. She said, you should meet my brother. He and I bonded. He introduced me to the business manager. And I got AC/DC 24 years ago. And unfortunately, shortly after I picked them up as a client, Salt Lake City happened. That's a terrible phone call.
No, that happened quite a while ago. Could you do a Reader's Digest version of that for the fans that weren't necessarily old enough to drive at that point?
It was several young people who the crowd fell on top of, and unfortunately they perished due to compression asphyxiation.
A mosh pit situation, or what would
No, it was in Salt Lake City. The band was playing with general admission. The crowd swayed one way. The crowd swayed the other. When they swayed back, some people fell. Then people fell on top of them. The crowd swayed again. And literally, these people suffocated by being compressed. And unfortunately, they were young, and it was a very unfortunate event. And I got that phone call. It was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, New York time. And it set off a whole pattern of things we did that night. And that was early on in my career.
Those are moments that change the industry, because it's not something that AC/DC set out to ever do. Nobody's looking to do an open floor show and endanger their fans. I think from the hardest rock bands in the world, Pantera, Ozzy Osbourne, Rob Zombie, they're there to entertain, and nobody wants anybody to leave the venue anything more than happy and entertained. So that had to be something that echoed not only through the settlements of lawsuits and claims, but through the guys in the band and management and right down to your desk. I imagine that had to have lasting effects on everyone, just like the Who and back in Cincinnati.
It shook up a lot of people. There was a tremendous amount of angst especially among the crew. It was a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking. Could we have done something different? Should we have done this? Should we have done that? I spent a lot of time on the phone and in person with a lot of the crew who discovered a bunch of the people who perished. And the one thing I kept saying to them is, close your eyes, look at what happened that night. Would you have done anything differently in your job, looking back in hindsight? And they all came back and said no. I said, then it was a very unfortunate situation, but there's nothing you could have done about it. So be upset, but you can't blame yourself.
You sell peace of mind. Insurance is there in case the worst case scenario goes wrong. And for us, it's paperwork and it's writing checks and going through the concept of, are we protected or are we not? Those are the conversations we normally have. And learning how to protect the audience better as we go, as other mistakes happen throughout the industry. Because you're a lawyer in the case of, what's going wrong in insurance around the world. When something goes wrong somewhere, it rings through the industry and you know immediately how that law changed. And you make sure that we know and we've adjusted accordingly. What to the future promoters and club owners and even the artists that are out there listening to the podcast would you say they need at the minimum level to be covered by? What are the things that everyone should have? Because not everyone can afford you. And honestly, when we were doing $8 tickets, it's really hard to do 55 cents a head back to insurance. Sure. You have to be doing...
Talking...
Well, no, but at a $35 ticket average for the band that you happen to manage home free, it's not that big of a problem.
It's not that bad at 61 cents.
And at the end of the day, it's an audience that we're not really seeing too many problems with anyway. It's more the Slayer shows and the Social D shows that I tend to be staying home worried about. Is this going to be a safe show? I don't worry about the home free show coming down going, phew, the crowd was okay that night, thank God. What are the things that, it's the club shows, it's the ballroom shows with the open floors, really.
The GA standing,
Yeah, and stadiums with the open floors and the arenas. But what are the things, where are the bases that people need to be covered that you, as an insurance rep, say, whether you get it from me or somebody else, this is needed?
Well, if I'm dealing with a promoter, obviously the most important thing is general liability. We don't write anything less than $1 million per event for a promoter. And then depending on... as I joke around, what does the building contract say they have to have for insurance? What does the artist contract say they have to have for insurance? Or what number or what premium can you go to sleep at night knowing you're paying? It's great to say, I have $500 million of insurance. Ridiculous number, I understand that. And the premium is X. Well, wait a minute, I can't sleep at X. Then, you don't get that much insurance. And it's also what you're doing. If you're doing a lot of metal and a lot of things that are harder than Trailer Trash Boys, you want to carry a higher limit than a promoter only doing comedy shows.
Sure.
So you have to look at that also. But the most important thing for a promoter and for an artist is the contract. Because everybody has the best intentions till things go bad. And then when they go bad, the first thing that happens, everybody says, what does the contract say?
And there goes subjugation,
Right. In fact, Dan, you and I had a situation about a year and a half ago, where the venue contract said one thing. There was a claim at the event, and fortunately the building manager was a hell of a nice guy and said, you know what? Even though the contract says this, we're partially at fault. We'll do the right thing by you. And I believe you split the claim 50-50. And it wasn't a big claim, but at least the venue.
I want to say I think you got us out of that for about $100.
Yeah, I think it was $250. No, it was actually in the great state of Tennessee. Yeah, but not Nashville. But again,
there was another talent buyer at my firm that was responsible for that date.
but it comes down to the contracts. Because when things go bad, that's the first thing everybody looks at. So with promoters, it's what does the venue contract say? What does the artist contract say? What does the security company and, all the others? What are you getting, as part of your buy-in with the building? That famous house nut.
So there was an old theory that we used to have where it was like, tell as little as possible to the insurance company. What they don't know can't hurt them. And it was the dumbest thing ever.
What, you and Jason had this?
No. Me and Jason both had earlier histories. And we're both 25 years into this business. So there were things before. But Peter has certainly brought us along over time with the more he knows, the better he can protect us. So artist contracts he reads and tells us what they should say versus what they do say and how to amend them.
Sure.
And when me and Jason didn't have life insurance, he reminded us that we have children and how important that was, and basically sent someone to my house to get a blood test so I would have life insurance in case something went wrong for Reese. Peter is hands-on.
That's an interesting scenario too, where you and Jason formally merging the company. I'm sure that there's, interest if one of you guys, God forbid, passes, are the partners taken care of. Those are unique business situations you're not running into.
The company has a policy on me, and I think it's just a matter of paperwork. Jason's policy has just been hung up by paperwork, but that's coming. But yeah, I have a life insurance policy for the family, and then the company has a life insurance policy.
And that's interesting because it's not, I think insurance, I think actuarial tables, and I think things that are, measurable by things. And a lot of things in this business, I can't put to an actuarial table. It's not like, how do you predict the chances of some tragic event happening or, equipment being broken or something like that. There's not, there can't be an actuarial table on those things, right? Like how this is a very unique subsection.
Yeah, you're right. There are no actuarial tables. And that's why when we get involved with an existing business, we ask for their prior history with insurance.
Mine's very good, by the way.
And that helps when we have to shop the insurance or we want to make a change with the carrier. Someone who has a lot of claims.
What do they call that? They run a report. What's it called?
It's called the loss report.
Loss report.
And that gives us a good indication. But not only does it give us a good indication of past history, but it also gives us a lot of times a history of a pattern. But getting back to what you were saying.
So like guys that cut security when shows are losing, things like that.
Well, no, actually, Dan, I was going to go back to something you said earlier about tell the insurance guy as little as possible. I had a client years ago who was the proverbial really good Irish Catholic boy, and he said what he learned early in his career is you don't lie to your priest, your doctor, your lawyer, or your insurance agent. He says lie to any of those, and you're going to end up on the wrong end of it. But getting back to
I think that you know that we tell you everything.
Oh, I know. And again, it goes back to what I said before. It's the communication. I had a client years ago that had a rash of work comp claims. And when we looked at the claims, we saw a pattern of what was happening. And it turned out it was a lot of new hires falling off ladders. So we sat down with the client and we discussed it and we saw the pattern, and they decided they were going to solve the problem. They went out and bought all new ladders and changed their learning procedure, and it stopped the claims. So the losses are important, but the patterns are more important. But again, I joke around a lot because, let's face it, nobody wants to see the insurance guy, all right? And I'll be one of the first people to admit insurance is boring as all get-go. So we try to have
until you need it.
Yeah, and that's just it. So when I have to give people stories, when they say, well, I'm not worried about that, and then we come up with, yeah, but this happened or this could happen. I have a client that I joke around a lot with, and they know one of my favorite characters to talk about is Marvin the Martian. So we start a conversation, and they go, and when is Marvin getting into the conversation? I said, I'll get there eventually. Because I don't like to say, so-and-so stepped off the bus and they twisted their ankle. I'd rather go with, they stepped off the bus and got hit by a meteor. Dan, as you can appreciate, if I said so-and-so stepped off the bus and twisted their ankle, that Jewish guilt would just never leave me. If they get hit by the meteor, I could live with that.
I once saw a matzo ball this big.
Don't laugh. The first time my sister made matzo balls, she didn't know they grew. And started with a big one and ended up with a really big one.
It was just excited to see her.
Yeah. We had slices of matzo ball that night.
So do you enjoy that aspect of getting to work with clients at the counsel part? There's a transactional table side of things you do, but you get to do things where you counsel people on decision making and the process they go through. Do you get involved with that? Do you like that part of it?
I never know what I'm walking into on any given day. I joke, and I get back to what I said about communications and contracts. My day begins with contracts, ends with contracts, and sometimes in the middle of the day, I do more contracts. I was on a call today with a bunch of attorneys, and they're looking at me for legal advice. And I said, guys, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I don't get the charge by the 15 minutes. Yeah. I said, I'll give you my opinion, but I'm not an attorney. I like giving people advice. And, I spend a lot of time with people in the trenches. I know what goes on out there. So to me, and I have a lot of fun. And to me, the day this job stops being fun is the day I drop the mic.
Boom. You picked a pretty incredible subsect of insurance to be working in. If you're calling insurance boring by any means. I mean, I think the subject that you picked for your corner of it is pretty incredible. You know, we're all really lucky to do what we do, but, you know, it's a pretty unique experience you have.
Can you name drop for us a little bit? Who else do you handle besides AC/DC and Warped Tour?
Bands or promoters?
Yeah.
Or festivals? So I do the Outside Lands Festival, so I deal with Superfly.
That's okay.
I don't do Thrasher.
He's an incredibly nice guy. Go on.
No, I like Mike. I actually have to deal with
Legally
Mike.
prohibited from talking on podcast tour, Dan Steinberg.
I actually have to deal with Mike once a year with the Warped Tour. Working with Kevin is so much fun. It's always interesting. And we deal with a lot of the bands that are on the Warped Tour. You know, I started to say about having fun with this. I have a client who's a promoter who's about the same age as I am. And we were out having lunch a while ago.
Which is 28, right?
Yeah, I wish.
In case you've never seen Peter, he looks like your oldest Jewish uncle who has the best joke ever and a warm hug and always a good crisp $5 for you as you head back to school.
But only if you get good grades, Dan.
That's a great Jewish uncle thing to say right there.
Yeah.
But anyway, he and I were talking one day, and he said, you know, sometime soon I'm going to retire. He said, and at some point I'm going to be sitting on my porch, and he goes, I'm going to just start laughing to myself and say, they paid me to do this job. And listen, I love getting paid, and I love the lifestyle I've been able to afford for myself and my family. But this job is fun, you know. Not knocking people who sit in an office 9 to 5 all day, but not for me.
That's actually what we do.
You get to go out and some of these things you're involved with from AC set of things. In Bonnaroo, you get to go to Bonnaroo and Forecastle and all these festivals. You get the backstage treatment for these things too, you know, which is going to be pretty cool to see your work in action at some of these major events where a lot of your things you're providing are real valuable service to those people at a festival. You know, insurance is a very important thing when you amass 85,000 people on a farm in Manchester.
So there's something I do want to
Hands are
talk
getting
about
weak.
that I think is in sales a fascinating thing, and you're one of my favorite examples when I talk to students, is when we realized we couldn't afford the level of insurance that you had after a year with you. When we came up to the second term, we realized we just weren't as big as a promoter as I thought we were yet. And this is going back, 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah, it's got to be.
And I called you and I said, we just can't afford to renew. We're going to go with the other company that you think we can't be with just because our tickets are too cheap. And you said, you'll be back. And I said, you're probably right. When we can afford it, we'll be back. And the entire time during the process, there was never a moment where you weren't available to me. Not when you came to town, you called and you spent time with us. When I saw you at conferences, you were always warm. There was never a moment of you left us. There was that moment of Uncle Peter is in the room, and it didn't matter that we weren't with you. And then the day when I called to tell you that we were ready to come back, that we could afford it, you said, see, I told you you'd be back. But you're the example.
It's a referrals game, right? It's, you know, like anything else, right?
Well, it's not only a referrals game. You know, I'm fortunate, blessed, whatever term you want to use, is I can honestly say I like everybody I deal with. You know, listen, on any given day I may get sideways with them, but at the end of the day, there's really nobody we deal with that I don't like. But again, Dan, you know, my theory and my philosophy kind of goes back to the Aspen Conference. You know, you come here, you hang out with a lot of people, and you leave with friends. I like to think people I deal with are my friend at the end of the day. One of my favorite stories with you, and I know you like my wife, but when straight no chaser, no. You know.
So Barbara is certainly a MILF, and there's absolutely questions.
Hey,
hold on.
We have
you open the door. So Barbara is absolutely gorgeous, and she's the sweetest woman on the planet. But he did not mean it the way that he just said it.
No, but I always like with you.
You set it up okay, Dan.
Yeah.
Barbara really likes straight no chasers.
Yeah.
So, and she's turned on a bunch of her friends to the band. And when they play Nashville, I always call Dan up and I say, I start the conversation. Hi, how are you? I have my credit card in my hand. He goes, how many tickets does Barbara want? And it's like, she's taken care of, you know. And that's friendship. That's not business.
So we didn't see each other at the Ryman this year?
No, because we were out of town.
Oh, okay.
But, and to me...
I actually missed Straight No Chaser at the Ryman this year, unfortunately.
Oh, that's right. Dan was not there.
But I appreciate everybody pointing that out.
I didn't point it out, and Luke, you were letting it slide.
No, he wasn't. He was looking at me like, it was the show you fucked up. So Straight No Chaser, that's usually the show everybody comes into, is... The Ryman is legendary and everybody likes it. Unfortunately, Trailer Park Boys and Chaser played the Ryman within a week of each other this year, and that made traveling hard. Plus, we had 7 shows that night, so my partner covered, and I settled the other 6 shows. But getting to hang out with Straight No Chaser is always the reward, because drinking at Roberts with the Miller High Life all night long is certainly.
We got to
a
get
fun
Barbara
time.
at that next year.
She doesn't drink, but she'll probably be happy to hang out with them.
Straight No Chaser, your mom's favorite band, including Barbara. Hey, Peter, I want to thank you so much for taking your time to join us on Promoter 101. Before we break, Aaron, you got to sit and witness the whole thing. What'd you learn?
That insurance is incredibly important. No, it's just really interesting. It's great to sit here with icons of the industry, and especially, I mean, from something that, insurance isn't incredibly sexy, but as Peter said, it's important, and I don't know. It was just great to be here and hear it all.
Well, it's really interesting because if you fall at the office, Peter's the one you call.
Yes.
If your rental car hits a wall, Peter's the one you call. And if a band hits somebody in the audience, you call the police, because that's assault and that shit doesn't stand.
But you call me afterwards.
No, we do call you.
Call Peter next.
Yeah.
Peter Tempkins can be found through Hub in Nashville office. What's the best way to find you?
The best way is email me
At?
peter.tempkins@hubinternational.com.
Mazel tov. Promoter 101 at Aspen, night 1.
First one of the books. Let's do this again soon, guys.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter, thanks for everything, man.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA. I'll be on Dan Steinberg's Perpendicular, fantastic psychedelic Promoter 101 podcast from South by Southwest, Thursday, March 16th.
That's it for the first episode of 2017 for Promoter 101.
We want to thank our pal Craig Newman at APA for the new Promoter 101 theme song. I know that's gotten stuck in my head a couple of times.
For sure.
Promoter 101's World Tour live podcast recording continues.
February 1st, we're going to be recording Promoter 101 at Polestar Live with special guests Stateside Presents Charlie Levy and Entourage Talents Wayne Forte. Be sure to register for Polestar today at polestar.live.
The 5th edition of Let's Drink, our party at Polestar Live with our partners at Bill Young, Access Pass, Ticketfly, Nederlander, Hub International, and of course Work Entertainment Emporium Presents, coming up Wednesday, February 1st at Exchange LA. You can register that through Ticketfly. We'll go ahead and post a link to that through the Promoter 101 Facebook page as well.
March 9th, like it or not Europe, Promoter 101 is coming across the pond. We'll be at ILMC at the Royal Garden Hotel in London. Sign up for ILMC 29 at ilmc.com. And on March 16th, Dan's going to be interviewing APA's head of music, Steve Martin, during South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Come slug some Shinerbach and eat some barbecue in the live music capital of the world. Get your South by badge at sxsw.com.
There's a rumor that there'll be a pretty good party afterwards, too, that we'll have details for very soon, right after that panel, too. So stay tuned for that. April 19th, we'll be doing a full taping during Canadian Music Week, featuring an interview with UTA's Jack Ross and another special guest to be announced very shortly. Next week, we'll be interviewing Dave Roberts and Segi Isho of Straight No Chaser and their manager, David Britz. That's right, from Works Entertainment. We'll be exploring the working relationship of a manager and an agent, recorded on location in Maui. And full disclosure, David Britz is Luke's partner at Works.
I'm happy to hear this interview. It should be great.
It was a good time.
If you have thoughts about the podcast or you want us to interview somebody, we want to hear about it. Send us an email with your ideas to steiny@promoter101.net.
And you can always follow Luke at Luke Pierce or me at The Jew on Twitter.
And be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're digging the podcast, drop us a review. We want to know what you think.
And God, don't be afraid to tell your friends that we exist. Word of mouth wouldn't hurt us. You know what I mean? Anyway, we want to be sure to thank you for listening in. I'm Dan Steinberg, and for my broadcast partner, Luke Pierce, we're out of here.
Hey, this is Wayne Forte from Entourage Talent in New York, and I'll be a guest on Promoter 101 at Polestar Live. Come on down and see us.